Okay, hi guys. So in this video, I'll be going through the day when I actually try to revive my old Ryzen CPUs. So I previously recorded this with no voiceover, but I'm just gonna do a talk over. So in here, I have a few CPUs. One of them is an old Ryzen 1300X. I'm just gonna skip through the VOD. And I'm also testing two old Gigabyte Aorus B450 full-size ATX motherboards. One of them with Wi-Fi, one of them without. I can't really remember. Oh yeah, as you can see here, I was actually holding it to the camera. So one of the CPUs, I think this one. Yeah, so this is a 1600X. I think I will flip it. Let me zoom in again. Yep. So one of it is a 1600X, which is a 6-core, I think 12-thread CPU, one of the old Ryzen 1000s, and this is actually one of my first Ryzen CPUs, the 1300X, which is I believe a 4-core, 4-thread CPU, and it's been so old that the IHS is like fully rusted. You can't even see the 1300X, like you can't see the label on it, even though the label is supposed to last. Like, it's so old. Yeah, so even the label is hidden. And I believe 1300X is actually a 4-core. Let me just Google it. 13 Ryzen 1300X specs. Okay, Tech Power Up has one. Yeah, it's actually a 4-core, 4-thread CPU. It's one of my first Ryzen CPUs that I have. Obviously, not my very first CPU in my whole my whole history of owning computers. I believe one of my first one was an Athlon CPU. Oh no, it's a Pintel. It's an Intel Pentium 2 or Pentium 4. I can't remember, but it was an Intel Pentium on a pre-built. And then my first DIY CPUs was actually Athlon XP. And it worked pretty well until I decided to, I think it died, and then I upgraded it to a Ryzen 1300X. So the 1300X, yeah, it was a 1300X, and then I think the motherboard died. But somehow the pins got damaged on the 1300X, and because it couldn't fit into the socket anymore, I actually upgraded and I bought a b450. Back then I bought a b450 motherboard and a 3600, a Ryzen 3600. So that was my upgrade. So I'm testing that old 1300X, my 3600, as well as the 1600. 1600 is something that I got from a guy from Carousel, because I was building this, the 3600, because I was actually building mining rigs at that time, I believe in 2020 or 2021. Okay, so I'll skip through. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to test if they're still alive. I really like that. The rusted 1300X is a one of a kind. So the IHS is so rusted that at certain angles you can't see the engraving on the IHS. Okay, then let's skip through. So I was using some of my old RAM that I have in storage, some of my old motherboards. What I was trying to do is trying to bring out all the parts, build a cheap low-end gaming CPU for benchmarking, and also trying to sell it off. I have it listed on Carousel, but currently it's not getting any traction because I put it in with a 1TB NVMe SSD, priced it at 500 SGD, which I think is a little bit above the market price for many used systems, but my case is brand new and all that, and the NVMe SSD is brand new, so I had to price it a little bit higher. Maybe half a year or a few months down the road, I might have to cut the price or maybe try and clear it off. But right now I can keep it as a benchmarking gaming PC. So this RAM, I can't, yeah, moving around, can't even see the, oh, basically the T-Force, yeah, the stickers there is not accurate as well. I believe it's a 2400 RAM and then a 600-watt smart power supply. Something I got from Amazon for cheap. I believe like 60 to 70 bucks. So I think 60 bucks. So what I will show you guys in this video is that it's actually not a good idea. Okay, this is a Saifuma 2, so a tower air cooler. This is an O1 as well. It's not a good idea to have parts which you don't know whether they are working or not and to put them together. What we should be doing, as I show later in the video, is that you need to make sure at least most of the parts are working, or like majority, like 90% or 80% of parts are working, and then you use all the rest of the working parts to test one sus part or one part which you're not sure whether it's working or not. So in this case, my mistake was that I'm not too sure whether the motherboards are working. I was quite sure the RAM stick should be working. When I booted the CPUs were working. So I'm trying to test both the CPUs and the motherboard in this video, which didn't work out well. So I was putting in the Ryzen, what was that? Can I see the engraving? My hair is blocking. No, I can't see it. Okay, so one of the CPUs in, and two RAM sticks. Take note, RAM sticks always put it one slot away from the CPU. So you need for dual rank or dual channel DDR4, right, and 5 as well. Always populate the first slot, the first RAM stick one slot away from here, and then the next one will be you skip another slot and populate it in the last slot. So that is how it works. I do not know why, I don't know the specifics, but if you put it in another slot, for example, you put it in the closest slot and the second last slot from here, somehow for certain motherboards it doesn't boot. Certain motherboards will still boot, but certain motherboards doesn't boot. Okay, so I'm trying it with just one stick. Okay, my mistake here was that I thought this stick of RAM was working as well. Apparently with this stick of RAM, my system also didn't boot. So I don't know whether is it the RAM's fault or something. So I was having too many sus parts. Like I do not know if my RAM is working, I do not know if my motherboard is working, and I don't even know if my CPU is working. So with so many unknown variables, it's really hard to narrow down. And I was using a GT710. So this GT710 is something that I bought during the mining boom as well, because I just wanted a cheap card that can power on my mining rigs, because I don't need a high-end display for my mining rigs. All the high-end GPUs are used for mining, so for the display I only needed like a cheap one to display the image of the mining status. So the GT710 is really good. It doesn't require any PCIe power. It's very low power card, so like it doesn't need extra power from the power supply. Just whatever is from the motherboard slot on the PCIe slot is good. So here I just plug in the fan, and then I slot in the air cooler. There was no need to apply thermal paste because it's a short-term test. I just needed to test whether it boots because I have no windows. I'm not planning to keep the system on for very long, and I tried to test it. So to switch on, I used the short circuit method, and my hair is blocking here. Yeah, so I was trying to find the power front panel LEDs, front panel pins here, and there are two pins here, which is once you short them, they will power the motherboard on. Took me a while, but eventually I did find it, I believe. So I'm gonna skip through. Okay, so I did manage to find the pins. I believe here. Okay. So pardon my sniffling as I am down with flu. But try to get some content out. I haven't been uploading in like a whole week. So try to get more regular content out for you guys. So managed to power it on, but the system doesn't boot. Okay. Oh yeah, my camera fell. So use the red light. It's the sort of like the warning light or the system boot status. So the red lights will alternate between like RAM CPU, boot, and VGA. VGA means GPU. So if the red blinking light stays on one particular zone, it usually means that particular zone is not working. So let's say it stays on the VGA. That means there's something wrong with your VGA card. If it stays on, let's say, your RAM, so maybe there's something wrong with the RAM, you might have to reseat the RAM, or the RAM could not be working. If it stays in the CPU light, so maybe your CPU is not working, and so on and so forth. But it's not 100% accurate, but it is a pretty good guide to help us diagnose what's the problem that causes the system unable to boot. When it is able to boot, the light will cycle through. That means it will cycle through CPU, RAM, VGA, and boot, and it will cycle through 3 times whenever you change like a part, or especially when you change the CPU, it will go through boot cycling. That's especially true for Ryzen motherboards. I don't know for Intel, but for Ryzen, it is pretty consistent, at least on the AM4 platform. It's pretty consistent process whereby it cycle through the boot phase 3 times, or the boot lights 3 times. Okay, so it wasn't able to boot, and I took out the CMOS battery to try and diagnose whether is it the CMOS battery, whether is it out of juice, because in my long history of building DIY PCs, I've been building my own DIY PCs for the last like 25 years. There were instances in the older days whereby if the CMOS battery was totally flat, it caused my system to be unable to boot. I don't know whether it still applies for like modern AM4 motherboards, but it was that applied during AM3 era, where I was using the Athlon XP. So anyway, couldn't get it to boot. I changed the GPU. You can see that it's trying to cycle, but it stays stuck right at a particular red light and it doesn't move. So if it doesn't cycle through and the red light keeps staying on, that means something is wrong with a particular part and it wasn't able to boot. So I couldn't get it to boot, and then let's move on to the next video. Okay, so in this next video, basically I bring it into my room where I have my mining rigs. So on my mining rigs, you can see my hanging GPUs here. These are some Vega 56s, and this corner is, I believe, a 3090. But anyway, it's a mixture. I think this display card here, if I'm not wrong, will be 6600 XT. So this is a working motherboard. It's a X570 motherboard. Tomahawk MSI Tomahawk X570, and basically I used the working motherboard and the working RAM on the motherboard to test out the CPUs. So first off, I took out the existing CPU, which is I believe a 3900X, and then I slotted in my rusty 1300X. So the 1300X, the pins were a little bit bent, but it was still able to be seated into the CPU socket. It requires a bit of wiggling and pushing. Because the bend didn't, I think I unbent them enough. Basically I was using the 1300X as a paperweight. Back then I thought the CPU was totally dead when it couldn't boot, and it probably because of bend pins and so on, couldn't sit well in the socket. So I left it on my table as a glorified paperweight. I thought it was like useless. So eventually, I remember there was one day I was like, what if I straighten the pins? I wonder if that CPU still works. That was years ago, and it worked back then, and now I wanted to test it again whether it still works. So I put it in, wiggled it, make sure it's set well into the slot, power on the system. Okay, so you can see these are the debug lights for this particular X570 motherboard. It is white instead of red. And I believe you will see them cycle. So they cycle through, go off, and they will light on again. Yep, so there's one boot cycle. So when it cycles through the rest of the other lights, that means, you can see it moving position. That means it's cycling through the CPU, RAM, VGA, as well as boot phase. So I think it just has to cycle through a third time. So again, the air cooler is not secured. So I cycle through a third phase, and I believe, we have boot. Oh, says no signal. I think it does boot. You're cycling another time. Did it not boot? Yeah, so you're cycling again. Okay, and then we have image, right? So we have boot screen. So the Ryzen 1300X actually does work. Let's pause here. Get better screenshot here when I'm not shivering, not shaking. So it was a Ryzen 3 1300X. It was a quad core, so it was a 4-core 4-thread, and it actually works. DRAM frequency was no default, which is 2133, because we reset. Everything was reset when CMOS has been cleared when you install a new CPU. So the 1300X worked. So it was so old, and even so old that even the IHS was rusty, but it still worked. How long was that CPU for? How long did I have the CPU? Let me check. The 1300X came out in 2017. So it's been 7 years actually. So it's now 2024, 2017. Yeah, 7 years. So it's a 7-year-old CPU. I don't know whether I bought it in 2017 or 2018. Probably around there. So I had that CPU for 6 to 7 years, and it still works. So to me, Ryzen CPUs has always been, pretty long lasting. I only had AM4 CPUs with bent pins. I never had a CPU that actually died on me. So they are no really reliable. So I should put it into Windows and all that. And then I tested the 1600X. So took it out. Yep. So here I'm just showing how it should be slotted. So basically when your CPU is in, you see that the Ryzen logo, if my camera is not shaking. So if the IO shield or the IO shield in the input output area of the motherboard is facing you as the user, the Ryzen logo should also be facing you. Then you will see this on the AM4 CPUs, you will see this golden arrow here. It should line up with this particular corner of the square socket. Okay, so how I really remember is that that corner lines up. I look for that corner on the pins, as well as I make sure that the Ryzen logo is facing me if the IO shield is facing me. Okay, then let's make sure it's well seated. Push down the securing arm, the locking arm, and then I just attach the fan cable, and I just let the fan sit on it. This is the Frost Commander, 140 millimeters from Thermalright. Pretty good cooler. Most of the modern CPU tower coolers from Thermalright are all good. I have 3 of them. Different models as well. I have the Phantom Spirit. I think I have the Phantom Spirit Evil, Peerless Assassins. I have the Frost Commanders, and so on. So I have 3 of the Thermalright tower coolers. They're all really good. So I believe the 1600X managed to cycle through as well, and it shows boot. So as you can see here, in HWD info, this is a AMD Ryzen 5 1600 on without the X, so 1600. So 6-core 12-thread CPU, also from the Ryzen 1 era. So this CPU survived as well. And let's check out the other video. Okay, then I swapped out the CPU, I believe, for a 3600. Have I swapped out yet? Can't really tell. Okay, so I'm taking it out here. Yeah, so I took it out. Then I slot in the 3600. Tap and make sure that it's well seated. Push down the securing arm and install the CPU cooler. Again, just to highlight that I didn't use any thermal paste because it is a very short test. And usually for short tests, yeah, even without, if you're not putting the CPU under load, you don't really need thermal paste. So this one, let it cycle through. I did believe, yeah, so the lights went on and off. That means it's going through its boot phase and eventually powers on. Okay. Yep, so here you can see on the screen here in the top right hand corner, it was a 3600, 6 core with non-X. So Ryzen 3600, another 6 core 12 thread CPU from the Zen 2 era, because I believe they jumped from, actually they had the 2000 series as well, Zen 1000 series, it's I think Zen 3, there's a Zen 3 era. So the Ryzen 2000 series and Ryzen 3000 series, and now we are on Zen 5. I am not sure, but right now we are on the 9000 series, right? So the Ryzen 3000 series, and I think the rest of the board was just showing that it manages to boot. Okay, so that's it. So I managed to test and found that some of my old GPUs are still working. As to whether the motherboards are still working, that one I have it in. I think I did it on another day. But the spoiler is that one of the motherboards was actually dead out of the two B450 gigabyte motherboards. Okay, we'll see you guys in the next video.